And so how did these evil communist regimes come into power in the 20th century? And the answer to that question is through the Jewish international bankers who were mainly from Germany, London and New York. And here we see Jacob Schiff, who was a leading partner in the international Jewish banking firm in Wall Street called Kuhn Loeb, who boasted on his deathbed that he provided $20 million towards the success of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. And then in 1949 we know that a key Jewish man was a man called Israel Epstein, and here he is in a photograph with Mao Zedong, second from the right on the bottom row, and he's surrounded by Jews there. And also another high-level meeting with Mao is also him being surrounded by Jews, and attending that meeting was Frank Coe, Israel Epstein, Elsie Fairfax Cholmondeley and Solomon Adler. And we also know that another prominent member of the Politburo was the propaganda minister, who was a man called Sidney Shapiro, who was an American Jew. And we see both Sidney Shapiro and also Israel Epstein at Israel Epstein's 90th birthday being held at the Jingfeng Hotel there in Beijing. And also you see another photograph here of Israel Epstein with Chairman Hu Jintao. And so we know that the Jews were involved in establishing the revolutions during the 20th century. And also we see also that David Rockefeller is an enthusiastic supporter of China. And when we look at the presidency of Xi Jinping, we realise that his defence spending has increased fourfold.
China has showcased its military might on an unprecedented scale as part of commemorations marking 70 years since the defeat of Japan in World War II. And while 12,000 troops and their weapons paraded through Tiananmen Square, the country's President Xi Jinping insisted China was committed to peace. The BBC's Carrie Grace is in Beijing.
No other country does remembrance like this, bringing a city of 20 million to a halt, turning the sky blue by ordering factories to close. Over recent weeks, China may have had trouble controlling its stock market and its currency. But when it comes to marshalling the nation for a choreographed spectacular, it has few rivals. The purpose, it says, is to cherish peace. It's all the doing of this man, President Xi Jinping, determined to demonstrate that he is the commander-in-chief and in control of events. Greeting the troops. He wants a disciplined, modern force to change the balance of power in East Asia. It was a display of Chinese military ambition that many countries didn't want to be seen to endorse. Leaders from wartime allies like the United States and Britain stayed away. President Putin was guest of honor, Russia ever closer to China since its relations with the West soured. And President Xi had a message for the world.
We Chinese love peace. No matter how much stronger it may become, China will never seek hegemony or expansion.
Some Beijingers wanted a glimpse of their new air force and defied instructions to stay away. But this was never a people's parade, nor was it an attempt at reconciliation between former enemies. The doves came last, the only symbol of peace.
But unfortunately, by releasing a few doves into the air, I don't really trust what Mr. Xi Jinping has to say about peace, because of the way that the Chinese communists have treated their own people, and particularly at Tiananmen Square. But more recently, of course, the oppression in Tibet that he's been responsible for, and also in Hong Kong, and his expansion into the South China Sea.
Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. 25 years ago, this image was seared into the mind and imagination of the world. But people have a lot of misconceptions about what actually happened. It certainly doesn't help that the Chinese Communist Party has been observing a 25-year-long moment of silence about the massacre, to this day hasn't released an official death toll, and tries to bury the story by referring to it simply as the June 4th incident. Not that they allow you to refer to it by that name either. So the first misconception is about the mysterious Tank Man. This did not actually happen on the day of the massacre. It actually happened the day after, on June 5th, after most of the killing was finished. Not that that takes away from the bravery of a man staring down a line of tanks, climbing on top of one, and demanding to talk to the guy inside. In fact, it adds to his bravery. He knew what happened the night before. The tanks, like those ones, had run people over in the streets. But he stood in front of them anyway. The second and third most common misconception people have are that students were massacred in Tiananmen Square. That's not really true. There was also plenty of killing happening on the streets of Beijing. Think about that if you ever visit. And students were only a small minority of the protesters. Of the more than 1 million who choked the streets of Beijing, only about 100,000 were students. The rest were academics and journalists, manual laborers, small businessmen, and party members. Why do we think of the students the most? Well, the students did start the protest, and they went on hunger strikes. Many of the other protesters would hold banners saying they were there to support the students. But there's another reason it was such a diverse crowd, and that's because of misconception number 4. The protesters weren't calling for an end to the Communist Party, or even really a Western-style democracy. They were more concerned about official corruption, the rule of law, the party's monopoly on information and power, the kind of problems China is still suffering under today. Boy, good thing those counter-revolutionaries were all shot, or else who knows what China could be like today. It's actually the Communist Party that most often paints them as counter-revolutionaries trying to overthrow the government. That's how they justify the massacre, that it was necessary for preserving China, instead of just preserving the party's right to abuse total unchecked power. And finally, the other common misconception is that the protests only happened in Beijing. There were similar protests going on at the same time in more than 300 cities. And it wasn't just in Beijing where soldiers were sent in to kill. Though again, it's hard to say exactly how many were killed since there's no official death toll, though we do know that at least in Beijing, the US Embassy put the number at more than 1,000, and the Chinese Red Cross, no affiliation with the actual Red Cross, counted 2,600 deaths before retracting that statement. But perhaps the biggest misconception is something the Communist Party itself has. Officially, they call the protests counter-revolutionary riots, that they were justified in massacring them, and that the Chinese people now all agree it was the right thing to do. But I think they know better than that. Otherwise, why would the party try so hard to keep the massacre under wraps? They know if people ever widely understood what the Communist Party actually is and what they've actually done, they would take to the streets again. Since the beginning, the CCP has always put on a show of leading Chinese people to a glorious future, that it exists to serve the people. Well, they shot that idea dead in the massacre. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored, but more importantly, thanks for joining together with people around the world and remembering something the Chinese Communist Party is trying so hard to get people to forget.
Adam Green here, no more news. We're recording. And my heart is beating hard. It's never easy to press record and make these videos, but this video is such utter importance and needs to be shared far and wide. This is probably the most important video I've ever done. My heart is beating hard on this one. I hope it's not censored. But I got a lot of information, you guys, and this is vital, vital, vital information. Critical. Look at all these tabs I got up here. I'm going to go through them real quick. Some of the stuff I covered before, but it's connecting these dots is it's the sinister master New World Order plan. So we're going to get into it now, okay? Hang with me. I'm going to get through this quick. So this is the Jerusalem Post, Israel and the unexpected New World Order. Geographically, Israel is just off center. Why then is it treated with such respect, especially by the likes of Russia and China? In the new and surprising economic world order, Israel could gain a degree of wealth not seen since the days of King Solomon. That's back when the Second Temple was around. It says, as for Israel, how is that this small country, a mere sliver of land, is accorded such deference? The world's only Jewish state is making deals with Turkey, Russia, China, in spite of their alliances with Iran, which is dedicated to Israel's annihilation. Why is Jerusalem pursuing such deals, and ambivalent at best about Israel? Why are these nations agreeing to them? A new world order, difficult for the West to recognize, answers many of these questions. The project, this is how Israel is going to take over the world with trade and technology. The project is called the Belt and Road Initiative. Unveiled only 4 days ago, it will take an estimated $7.5 trillion to develop, but the benefit is nothing less than an explosion of prosperity, not just for participating countries, but for the whole world. No less than 75 nations have joined the Silk Road Chamber of International Commerce. So it's two parts. It's technology and it's trade. Members include all of the Eastern Goliaths, China, Russia, India, the BRICS, and but here's the part. Most importantly, Israel is positioned to guard the world's internet. Everything today is traded, controlled, and administered online. And Israel is emerging as the world's #1 guardian of the World Wide Web. This means regardless of being a few miles off track from China's land and maritime roads, it is positioned to be the center of both belts, trade and finance, and the internet. Economists worry that China's ambition could trigger a global economic collapse, remember that, a currency collapse specifically. Maybe BRICS and One Belt Road don't care. A global currency collapse might be seen as a way to wipe the slate clean of nation-based currencies. We've been hearing about the one world currency, global currency for a long time. That's like the pillar of the New World Order, Jewish end times, Judeo-Christian end times conspiracy. So wipe the slate clean of nation-based currencies, especially the US dollar, and establish an international one like Bitcoin perhaps. If Bitcoin is the model for a new internet-based global currency, Israel is likely to be its guardian too, protecting that currency from hackers around the world. You heard that right. Israel in charge of all finance. As chief of security of the world's information and currency, and with energy dependence, Israel stands to gain substantial wealth. So this is from Jerusalem Post, July 2017, Israel and the Unexpected New World Order.
You ready? Report, Israel passes US military technology to China. This is December 24, 2013, military.com. Israel passes US military technology to China. Okay, remember the Chinese communists are our enemies, and Israel is supporting Chinese communists because they were all created together. You watch, all right. China is hungry for advanced Israeli technology. I mean, I feel stupid even having to explain this, but it seems I have to because there's no one else online doing this. I did a search. I couldn't find a single commentator talking about this. Not one person. There's just the usual suspect, the world, John, just the same people I talk to, and they've got like 500 views. There's not one single person with 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 views anywhere out there talking about this. Not one. That's what fascinates me. The whole place is freaking. Even worked it out yet? Who's running the alt media? China is hungry for advanced Israeli technology. And I'm just going to give you 1/100th of what I've collected. 1/100th. Oh, look at this. How Israel used weapons and technology to become an ally of China. I'm not sure how this has to be spelt out for you. Chinese comes. The Chai comes. China's taken over. China's going to destroy us. Okay, Alex. Do you reckon we could encourage Alex to move to the next level? How Israel used weapons and technology to become an ally of China. If we keep at this, Jones has already taken us 2/3 of the way there. We just have to slap him in the fucking head. Boom! And move it to the next one, Israel. We can do that. You've got to attack, but do it politely. Do it very politely to Jones. Don't go out and diss him. We know you're a Zionist. Say, hey, Alex, just be really nice. I'm already trying to get on Mike Adams' real.video. Mike Adams works with Alex Jones. I've already had problems. Then we're doing a little back and forth between the admin. Oh, there's something wrong? What's wrong? What won't work? Oh, okay. Now, how Israel used weapons and technology to become an ally of China. Please focus on Jones. That's where you need to go. All right, it's just laid out for you. I mean, oh God, when I watch this stuff. Israel-China relations, innovation, infrastructure, investment. Just read this article. It just lays it out for you. Explain China's growing interest in Israel. Why is China investing in Israeli innovation and infrastructure? What are the national security implications? Oh, come on. What are the national security implications of China's investments in Israel and Israel-US relations? Yeah, that's a very good question. Go and read this. What is Israel's role in the China's Belt and Road Initiative? I mean, can you find a single mainstream commentator with their massive amounts of money, their massive subscribers, that is even talking about this? Can you find one? Can you find one? Because here's the core. What's going on in the Middle East? What is the impact on Israel's from China's growing footprint in the Middle East? I mean, it's being laid out for you. Netanyahu, 2 times of Israel Chinese. I hope Beijing's superb relations with Israel will affect its UN votes. This is 2017, March. All right, I'm going to read this for you again. All right, you ready? Netanyahu, 2 times of Israel Chinese. I hope Beijing's superb relations with Israel will affect its... All right, I hope Beijing's, quote, superb relations with Israel will affect its UN votes. And if I could be bothered editing this, every time I'd say that, I'd cut back to Jones going, Chinese communists, they're going to kill us, the Chinese communists are taking over. I would just cut back. In fact, I might in the main video I'm doing. All right. I mean, I can't believe I'm having to say this. That's why I can't be, I feel like am I in a dream? Maybe I am a genius. Maybe all the little Telpiot crew, we're all geniuses and we just didn't know it. No, that's not the answer. The answer is the alt media is completely taken over, just like the mainstream media, completely taken over. How hard do you think it is to handle James Corbett or a really graceful, any one of the 1,000 people out there bleeding this same shit? They already say, I've seen really graceful Corbett and that Ryan Dawson idiot saying, what do you want me to talk about on their Patreon accounts? On their various other accounts. What do you want me to talk about next? Tell me what you want. So, of course, the people with the most money who set up that, I love you, Grace, or love you, James, you're the best, Sibel, whatever. They're going to give $500, $1,000 at a time, and just the people get a taste for the money, and they just take over. How hard it would take $2 million max to run the entire alt media narrative, all the people who are anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, talking about Jewish power. It would take $1 million. That's all it would take a year. $1 million, not even that. And you've got control of them all. Easily. Because I'm telling you right now, there is zero money in this. All right, zero. All right, if it wasn't for someone just sent me $2,000. Thank you, John Wilson. An old hardcore communist. I'm going to be talking with him very soon. All right, I'm talking hardcore. Highest levels of the Communist Party. Highest levels. We're going to be talking with him very soon. Saul Alinsky. All right, they're the best people. You need to get in touch with the left, man, who've sort of, post 40, when you all grow up and go, I think I'm being used somewhere along the line. Those people. You need to talk to these people, man. I'm telling you now, you need to talk to these people. I'll tell you how it all works. In Beijing, Netanyahu looks to marry Israel's technology with China's capacity. That's in March 2017, a year ago, 18 months ago. I'll read it for you again. Remember, the Chinese communists are the enemy? The Chinese communists are the enemy. Alex Jones, you need to get on every channel and really politely get a list of links. You can get all these links. Go to Joseph Davis' sites. I'll show it later. Get the links and say, hey, Alex, I'm really concerned. The Chinese communists are the enemies. Ring into his show. Be polite, though. Just be polite. He said, I'm willing to learn. Look, it would take an hour just to discuss the game theory behind Alex Jones. There's a very simple view that obviously he's compromised and works for Israel. That's a simple view. I think it might be a little more nuanced, but whatever, we're not going to get into that. We're just going to say be polite because he has to be dragged down this path. Let's use him. Let's not derail him. Let's suck hold to him and get hold of the train because he's already fucked himself by saying the Chinese communists are the enemy. Now we just have to push him the rest of the way. Just say, step aside, Alex, and let's push fast forward on the right track with his train, which is doing 30,000 miles an hour. Let's get a hold of it. Let's not derail it. Let's get a hold of it. Everybody start going onto his YouTube channel. Everybody start going onto Mike Adams' Real Video. Everybody, and be really polite and nice. and say, I'm really concerned, Alex, you need to take the next step. Israel. In Beijing, Netanyahu looks to marry Israel's technology with the Chi-Coms. The Chinese communists are working with Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, supposed friend of the United States. Let's go on. This is just a search of the Times of Israel. So all I wrote in was China, Israel technology. And what did I get? I've got about 200 articles. Chinese investors resuming Israeli tech investment. You know that China makes massive investment in Israeli lab meat technology. This is a thing too. It's everything. Nanotechnology. I mean, it blows your mind. And the smart cities program, of course, is the big one. Israel's leading the smart cities program. They're going to shove everyone in smart cities, vaccinate and sterilize. The woke and goy are going in, starting with Asia. And Malaysia is one of the heads of that. And believe me, when the majority Sunni Muslim population of Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states find out that Israel's leading all these initiatives, that's the end of the Belt and Road Initiative. Let me tell you. It's going to take a lot of effort to keep it going. Chinese-Israeli fund to invest $250 million in medtech. Ex-Israeli chief scientist helping Guangzhou jumpstart its tech. That's in China. Israel-China set up first accelerator project in Beijing. Technion, that's the big Israeli Institute of Technology. Technion opens Israel's first university campus in China. China's Guangzhou to set up Tel Aviv base, eyes larger firms. Israel-China business. Do you want me to just keep going on? It goes on forever. It goes on forever and ever. The Chi-Coms, Alex Jones, the Chinese communists are killing America. The Chinese communists have taken over America. And all I can read everywhere is Benjamin Netanyahu with the Chinese. That's leverage. Get onto Alex Jones's side. We've got to push this over so it stops being Russia, China, and starts being Israel. Scaling chutzpah by the billions. Israeli ingenuity hits the ground in China. I'm telling you, this is literally a taste. I've got hundreds of these. There's too many. I was like, oh, that's enough, Julia, that's enough, Joseph. No more. I've got too much. China, Israel work together in technology and innovation. That's 2018, just this month. Public data doesn't capture extent of Chinese-Israeli deals, says investor. Having spent the past decade living and working in Hong Kong and Beijing, investor Amil Galor is one of the early pioneers of the tightening business ties between China and Israel. I mean, I could just do this for hours. Shanghai Mayor visits Israel to deepen cooperation in innovation and key industries. Innovation, of course, is code word when you're talking Israel and innovation. That means stealing off the United States. Israel-China affair blooms even as culture gap weighs on rapport. Mobileye. Now, Mobileye, of course, are now leading the world with Intel. Intel bought them for $15 billion. Mobileye will be running the entire driverless car program, and China is basically working with them. I hope you get this. It's going to be designed in Israel, manufactured in China. The movie RoboCop showed all this. Chinese-Israeli fund to invest $250 million in medtech. Excellent. It'll be an Israeli-Chinese medical technology giving me my radio frequency kill switch nanotechnology. I can't wait. Yefezul on China's interest in Israeli innovation. Israel aims to become world's 15th largest economy by 2025. Israel-China set up first accelerator program in Beijing. Africans, yeah, that's to do with, again, Africa. Israel's moving into Africa with China. A Chinese focus, Israeli entrepreneurs eye Chinese opportunities, seek local partners. Now, that's just the taste. Or I've just given you a taste. We've worked it out now. Chinese communists are the enemy, according to Alex Jones, and Israel is working directly and running China now. And I'll show you how they run.